Hello, welcome to Raymond Castile's Basement of Horror. Today we're going to look at Shadowbox Collectibles. Yes, I know that sounds like something that you would buy at Michael's or Hobby Lobby, like a craft item. Make a shadow box with little furniture and little dolls, but no, this is a different kind of shadow box. Here we go. That is an example of Shadowbox Collectibles monster toys. That is a Bigfoot from Shadowbox Collectibles. And you've seen this guy on the show, a few times before. He's been in the background. I've held him up to illustrate different things, but we're going to focus on this guy and his buddies today. Shadowbox Collectibles Myths and Legends. That's the name of the series. Shadowbox Collectibles Myths and Legends series. In the 90s, this company did a whole line of cryptozoology and supernatural and mythological monsters and fantastical creatures. And this Bigfoot was sort of the flagship of that series. But they also did aliens and more fanciful things like unicorns. And we're going to look at quite a few here. I don't have all of them, unfortunately, but I have quite a few, so I think we'll have a good representation. Here's another Shadowbox item. Just for contrast, that's a dragon. And Shadowbox repurposed this dragon many times in different colors and styles. Same sculpt. They sold him in a box, as we're going to see. And I think they had different styles of boxes, different themes. But they got a lot of mileage out of this dragon. But this is the original version. You can see that the range is pretty broad. We've got, on the one hand, more of a cryptid Bigfoot, and then a mythological creature, a dragon. So they covered both. They're both in the realm of myth. Whether you think Bigfoot is real or not, he might be real, but he's also a myth. And as I said before, these days I tend to think Bigfoot is not real. I used to, in my younger days, I used to think he was real. But in this modern information age where everybody knows everything about everything, it's hard for anything to be mysterious. And we just know too much. We know too much for the idea of something like this to be credible. Or the Loch Ness Monster or many other things. I mean, I wish they were all real. But it just seems like there's no place left for them to hide. But that's another, I think we went over that in a previous episode. Just to give you a couple more examples. Here's a packaged Shadowbox Collectibles item. You hear a lot of conspiracy theorists talking about the Reptile People, or people joking about, Mark Zuckerberg being a reptile, or whatever celebrity being a reptile. Well, this is what they're talking about. This is where that started. This is an extraterrestrial reptile person. And I don't know, I was going to say I don't know what came first, the miniseries V or the belief in these things, but these came first because I remember reading about stuff like this as a child before V was made. So this inspired, among many other things, this inspired V, this idea that aliens look like humanoid dinosaurs, upright reptiles. There were sightings, supposedly there were sightings of reptilian aliens, and that became part of UFO lore. And how that became sort of a cultural meme, I don't know. I don't know. Was it V? Was it something else? Why do people now use this as like a cultural shorthand to say somebody's inhuman? They don't say he's a Neanderthal or something like that, or a troglodyte, which is what they might have said years ago. No, they say he's a reptile. Not like an iguana, but an alien, an extraterrestrial reptile. Somehow that became a cultural shorthand for insulting someone, dehumanizing someone. And it also became politicized among conspiracy theorists. If you, for some reason, you listen to them, you'll hear them talk about the reptiles, the reptile people. Well, that's what they're talking about. That's a toy of a reptilian alien. Well, let's talk about the history of this toy line. Shadowbox Collectibles. The Myths and Legends series began in 1994. There's a little bit of confusion about the dates, but I'm going to go with 94. 1994. That is a date on some of the boxes, but it's a little fuzzy. But I'm going to go with 1994 as the year this line premiered. And the first series of boxed monsters, which you're going to see, consisted of Bigfoot, the Lochness Monster, the Dragon of St. George, a unicorn, and an alien life form, basically a little gray alien. And then there was a second series of big monsters that included a Centaur and the Yeti. Just those two in the second series. And then they took some of these sculpts and repurposed them in glow-in-the-dark and rainbow colors, and they went Super 7 on them and made a variety of different types of plastic, types of materials, different color applications, different kinds of packaging, or no packaging, just sold with a tag. Some of these sculpts got used quite a bit over the years. They also produced this alien line, the Myths and Legends series Aliens, and there was a first and second series. I only have the first series, so unfortunately we'll get to those in a few minutes, but you won't be seeing the second series. I don't have them. They're harder to find and more expensive, and I just don't have those, unfortunately. But I have quite a few other things, so I hope you'll be happy to see them. Well, let's talk about the distribution. How did I discover these things? The Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and the unicorn were sold at PetSmart. The pet store where you go to buy I buy my cat food at PetSmart, or little toy mice for my cats. They were at PetSmart. There was a shelf section full of these things in the mid-90s. But as far as I remember, they only had Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, unicorn. Now, they might have had a dragon at some point, but I don't remember seeing him. The alien, the big alien, not the Giger alien, the one you're going to see let's just show him to you since we're talking about him. This alien. That alien. He was sold at Suncoast Video. Do you remember that store? Suncoast Video. And they had quite a few of them at Suncoast Video. The Yeti and the Centaur were sold in an ad in Fangoria. Very strange choice. But Fangoria magazine had a full-page ad for the Yeti and Centaur figures. I never saw either of those in a store. I'm assuming they were in stores, but I never saw them. And I never saw the dragon in a store. I'm assuming it was in stores, but I didn't see them. These are sort of bookstore or gift shop kind of items. I could imagine a bookstore selling these, particularly if it was a New Age bookstore in the 90s. I could imagine gift shops selling these. I'm sure like Area 51 or Roswell, the tourist traps around those areas, I would imagine they would have stocked up on Shadowbox Collectibles figures. I'm just assuming, I don't know, that maybe Loch Ness might have had some. You know, tourist locations like that. They seem like kind of gift store type, souvenir type items, or the kind of thing that if a bookstore has a little toy section, that they might be in the bookstore toy section. But I only saw them at those stores. So it was a very strange distribution. I did look up the address for Shadowbox Collectibles. All these packages have the same address. It's in Miami Springs, Florida. And I looked up the street address. It's a residential house. And I did check the history of the house, and it's the right house. Shadowbox Collectibles is listed as one of the previous owners, but it's just a house. It's a nice house, but it's a house with bedrooms and a kitchen and a pool. It's a house. Not an office building, not an industrial building. It's a house. And that makes me wonder about what kind of an operation Shadowbox might have been. Could it have been just like a one-person company operating out of their home? Maybe they just had like a little work area and they sculpted these monsters and said, hey, I can make this into a business. I don't know. It could have been a family business, a one-person business, or something that started in somebody's house and then grew into something bigger. But that's interesting that the headquarters is a house, or at least it was. As far as I can tell, Shadowbox is no more. The company doesn't exist anymore. I'd be interested in finding out more about Shadowbox and who started it and why and the history of the whole thing. I bet there's a story there. Particularly now that I know it was based in a house. These are pretty elaborate toys. These aren't homemade toys. So, and they had major distribution in retail stores. So the idea that it was based out of a home is very strange. I'd like to know more about that. I bet there's an interesting character, if he or she is still alive, that would be nice to interview. Well, that's research for another day. Let's just talk about these toys for the moment. Well, let's look at... I think this is the first one I saw, the Lochness Monster. So here is Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. As you can see there, it says Loch Ness. Not Loch Ness, Lochness. It's full of the quality of being loch. It's so locky, so much loch. It's just full of Lochness. One word, Lochness. And of course that is a mistake. It should be two words, Loch Ness. It is a lake named Ness. Loch Ness. So that's kind of, I mean, that's kind of charming. I like that there's a little weird mistake like that. There's Nessie. Nessie's cute. I was going to say she's cute. I always think of the Loch Ness Monster as being a she, because, you know, that name, Nessie. That's actually pretty cool, that color. Look at that. And they all have these dioramas in the back. And I think you'll get a better look at them later. And this weird paper, what is that? That is a scroll that has the legend of the monster. Kind of like Tomlin's famous Monsters of Legend with the legend on the back of the card. Well, this has a whole scroll. And you see why I kind of think it's like a bookstore sort of an item. Isn't that kind of like something you'd see in a bookstore? What does this say? Free full-color story scroll of Lochness Monster inside. Not the Loch Ness Monster. You get a free scroll of Loch Ness. There's just so much Loch Ness in that scroll. You open that scroll up and there's just Loch Ness oozing out of it. It just falls onto your lap. So much Loch Ness. This is the back. Kind of a cool image there. Look at that. That looks like something that'd be in a children's book about the Loch Ness Monster. And it has a little bit of information about the monster. And I haven't looked at all these scrolls, but I think that the image on the back of the box is the same as the image on the scroll. But the text is different. The text on the scroll is more elaborate and gives you a little synopsis, sort of like a pre-Wikipedia synopsis of what this monster is. What is the legend, the myth of that monster? And this shows you how you could display it in that diorama inside the box. It shows the scroll opened up. Here's a neat little image. Again, looks like something out of a 70s children's book about the Loch Ness Monster. I'm thinking that's a little castle in the corner there. But someone's in the castle. The lights are on. Someone's in that castle looking out at the loch, seeing the monster. Now that monster, that Loch Ness Monster, is obviously molded, it's based on this sculpt. Now, this is a sculpt that has been around a long time. I think the first time it was used was a solid blue toy for the British Museum. I do have that. I don't have it handy, but I have this handy. This is a more modern use of the same sculpt. Now, though, the Shadowbox one turns the neck around so that it's looking back at itself, but it's essentially the same sculpt. And I had a fish tank that had another version of this that had extra texture sculpted over the skin, and it was a vinyl Loch Ness Monster. It was an entire tank, and that included this Loch Ness Monster toy you put in the tank. And yes, I did use it, and I put fish in it, and had a Loch Ness Monster in the tank and fish swimming around. I still have that. It's yellow. I still have it somewhere. So I have that. I have the blue British Museum one. I've got this. And they're all essentially the same sculpt. And what the Shadowbox one does, it just takes the head and just twists it so it's looking over its shoulder toward its back. Which is, it's a nice dynamic pose. And it helps it fit in the box, too. So whoever was designing these toys obviously did repurpose some things and got their hands on an example of one of the toys, one of the many toys that have used this exact sculpt, and just twisted the neck around. And I think some of these other toys show evidence of perhaps having parts that were repurposed. One interesting thing, about this Bigfoot, if we maybe jump around to Bigfoot here. He's so handmade. I mean, the look of this thing, it just looks like he's hand sculpted, and part of that is this area. You can just see where the fingers come around, like someone was sculpting it, holding it like that as they were working on it, and there's where the fingers go, right there. I mean, it's very obvious where the fingers would go. So I think that's how it was being sculpted. Someone was working on it and holding it just like that, and it just became part of the sculpt. And I'm wondering if these hands or some part of this might have been repurposed somehow. We'll get to this. We'll get back to this Bigfoot. Obviously, he's my favorite. I mean, even though I think the Loch Ness Monster was the first one I saw, the reason I collected all of them was I just love that Bigfoot. We'll talk about Bigfoot. Here's a small Loch Ness Monster. It's a miniature version of the big one, but this is licensed. There was a Ted Danson movie called Loch Ness in the 90s, and this was a licensed tie-in for that movie. I think this is the only licensed item in the series. And you can see that they fixed the name. It's Loch Ness with a space, Loch Ness Monster, because the movie is named Loch Ness. It's got the movie logo on it. So that's cool. Little movie tie-in. I don't think they did any other licensed pieces for the series. I think that's it. Well, let's see. I think we've talked enough about the Loch Ness Monster. Let's go on to Bigfoot. I love this Bigfoot. I have multiples of this Bigfoot. I don't know how many I have. I've got multiples. So here's Bigfoot. I love that. Look at him peeking out of the darkness there. There he is in his forest. Ah, look at him. He's so cute. He's got a nice green forest to live in. You see all the way back there in the trees. Good look at it. Now, when I saw this at PetSmart, I freaked out. I just loved this. And I mean, it's the most straight-faced, serious Bigfoot toy, I think, to this day. Well, no, I mean, there's that line of action figures that, the Monster Mart sells them. I've got one. I've shown it before. Those are pretty darn serious. Okay, so those aside, certainly, let's say up until this time in the 90s, this was the most serious-looking Bigfoot toy I'd ever seen. This was not bionic Bigfoot. This was not Ernest Borgnine made up to look like the Yeti. This wasn't some big chubby Bigfoot in a game or a stuffed toy, kind of a teddy bear Bigfoot. This was Bigfoot. This was the Bigfoot of legend. And it's too bad he's not articulated, but it's okay. It was a very, very authentic looking, serious Bigfoot. And I'd never seen a toy representation of Bigfoot as just straight as this thing. This was an attempt to really depict Bigfoot as he was reported to look like. Not stylize him or put a spin on him. So yes, since this time, there have been other things. But up until this time, this was unique. and putting him in that diorama like that with that background, you know, that's really cool. Here's the side. I'm guessing that's the prototype. It does look a little different, doesn't it? And the scroll has that image, plus it has the Patterson-Gimlin famous Bluff Creek image. Whether they got license for that, I don't know. That is copyrighted, so be careful using that. That's what it looks like in his little diorama. Now I have the box that other one came out of. Oh, gosh, it's all dusty. Can we get out of here? Oh gosh, it's leaving dust everywhere. I have these scissors. I feel like I need to wash my hands after this. Speaking of dust, oh, there it is. Yikes, look at all this dust. Oh my gosh. Ugh. Speaking of dust, in the 90s, I went to the Kane County, is that a bug? Gross. I went to the Kane County toy show to set up. The only time I've ever set up there. In the 90s, I would occasionally set up at like the Machinist Hall toy show locally. But I went to Kane County once. It's in the Chicago area. It's a big toy show. I was there with my friend Andy, and I set up, had a table, and there was just this white, fine, powdery white dust that just coated everything. Okay, that was 35 years ago, I guess, maybe more than that. Well, when I was digging these out, these were buried in my collection. I had to move things out of the way to dig in there and get some of these things out of wherever they were hiding. When I got the Yeti, which you'll see in a little bit, he had plastic over him, but he was coated in that fine powdery dust. And I thought, that's Kane County dust. He's got a layer of Kane County dust all over. I must have taken him to that show back in the 90s to sell him, and no one bought him. No one wanted him. No one wants anything I like, but whatever. But he had that Kane County dust. It was unmistakable. You recognize it when you see it all over. And I said, I haven't laid eyes on this thing for 35 plus years. I haven't touched this thing in at least 35 years. Until today. So that's how things just kind of get buried in my collection. I don't see them, I don't touch them. And decades can pass and I don't even remember that I have them. Well, let's see here. There was more ordinary dust over all this stuff, but there was that special Kane County dust on that Yeti. So here is the Bigfoot diorama without the Bigfoot. You see he's got an earth-colored base, and he's got really elaborate artwork of that forest going deep into the background. So it's a very nice diorama. Let's see here. I've never untied this. I feel like something bad's going to happen if I untie this. Maybe Bigfoot will appear and say, "Why did you untie my scroll?" Have you guys watched The Legend of McCullough's Mountain? I uploaded this film the day after Christmas. So the one sheet for that movie, The Legend of McCullough's Mountain, is very, very, very rare. And there was an author, pretty well-known author, a lot of accomplishments to his name, who was online. I guess he's writing a new book that's going to touch on that film in some way. And he was saying he'd been looking for 20 years for that poster. He didn't think it existed. He thought, even though he's seen newspaper ads for that poster, he didn't think they actually made the poster because he couldn't find one. And then someone pointed out that, well, on Worth Point 20 years ago, there was an example of the poster on eBay or on one of the auction sites. And so there's this discussion about this poster, about how impossible to find this poster was, and does it exist? Is it possible to find one? And I said, "Hello, I've got one." So I did my best to take a picture of it and sent it to this author. It was a terrible picture. I mean, it's a folded poster, and I don't really have any place to properly set it up and light it properly and take a good picture. So I mean, I hope it's a usable image, but and that's why I'm not. I hope I remember to not post the image of it in this video, because I don't want to preempt whatever it is he's going to do with that image. That's for him to use. But I sent him the image. But I'd never seen that movie. Gosh, this is wound so tight. I'd never seen the movie, so I went online, and I'd always heard how bad it was. I found a few different uploads on YouTube, but the audio is just horribly out of sync. Several seconds, you couldn't watch it. It was just, the audio had no connection to the visuals whatsoever. It was either several seconds ahead or behind. But I could tell there was something there. I liked what I could see of it. So I spent the day after Christmas resyncing the audio. And I had to do it line by line by line because it was that messed up. You couldn't just sync it at the top of the film and let it go and have it all fall in place. Every 30 seconds it went out of sync again. I don't know if the audio was going at a different speed than the visuals, or if there were just so many missing frames, or I don't know. But I synced it all up, and I don't know. I like that movie. It's cheesy and awful, but I like it. I think it's fun. So if you haven't watched that, watch it. But it's it's a Bigfoot movie, sort of. You'll understand when you see it. It's a Bigfoot movie the way Curse of Bigfoot is a Bigfoot movie. After all that, come on. Okay, so there's the scroll. That only took an hour, and you see there's the Patterson Gimlin image. That's what it looks like. And it's got these aged, distressed edges. This is like parchment or something. This paper's unique. I'm trying to see if there's a copyright on the Patterson Gimlin thing. You know, I think there's a frame of the Patterson-Gimlin film that's PD, public domain, so that people are allowed to use. So that might be what this is. But the rest of the film is copyrighted. I'm not going to read all this. But it's a pretty good rundown of the Bigfoot legend as it was known at that time. Wow. That's a substantial item, that scroll. That took some production to make those things, to write them. They're pretty well researched, considering this is before Wikipedia. You can just go online and get all this information. So they're pretty well researched. I mean, I'm not going to go through them all here, but I've read the text of most of them, not the ones I own, but like, online. Over the years, I've seen the text. And they're pretty good as far as the information for the time. They're definitely printing the legend, so to speak. They're not. There's no critical thinking going on. But considering that information was not as readily available then, someone had to have gone to a library and read a bunch of books to get all this information about all these different creatures. Well, let's put him back here. Alright, so another character in that first series was the alien life form. There he is. Oh gosh, I got dust all over me. Alien life form. And you can see it's basically a little gray alien. And the backdrop, what is that? Like a desert backdrop? Is it supposed to be Roswell or Area 51? Or I don't know. Now let me look at that thing in his hand. What is he holding? Oh, he's it looks like a phantasm sphere. But it's gold and silver. Oh, it's crop circles. That's what the background is. Oh, okay. On the viewfinder, it looked like a desert, but now that I can see it with the naked eye, it's crops, fields with crop circles, and there's a UFO up there beaming down some light. Free full-color alien life form cyber panel. So it's not a scroll in this one. It probably doesn't have that parchment, distressed edges kind of thing. A little different theme with this one. There's the crop circle. Now I can see it clearly. And there's this little phantasm ball. He's cute. Now, Shadowbox used this sculpt again and again and again. I don't know if they released the other ones in boxes like this. I think the other ones were loose and tagged. But they really got their money's worth with this sculpt. They kept putting it out, different versions of it. I showed you the back of the Bigfoot box, didn't I? Yeah, I did. So here's the back of the alien life form. You can see it's got the other monsters in the series. And is the UFO, and that is on the backdrop. Interesting, they don't have the alien pictured there. Looks like the opening of the X-Files. That sky. And that's what he would look like if he were displayed with his diorama. It's the scroll, whatever it is they're calling it, and that. They're not calling it a scroll. They're calling it a cyber panel. I don't have a loose one of these to show you, but he's pretty cool. He's got, he's all silvery. He's different. He's got a different style from the other ones. Yeah, let's look at the dragon. Dragon's box is a little... the condition's not quite as good. I think I got the dragon online. I think I had to resort to eBay for the dragon because I never saw the dragon at a store. All these other ones, well, most of them I got at the store. Dragon, I think I had to get him a few years later on eBay. I never found him in a store. But he is the Dragon of St. George with panoramic display. Free full-color story scroll of the Dragon of St. George inside. Here is the dragon. So we saw him loose. He doesn't stand up. At least the loose one I've got. I don't think there's any way to make him stand up. Yeah, it must be a St. George. He's got a castle environment on the box. It looks pretty cool, doesn't it? I mean, it creates a whole world. It creates a scene. And I like the way the sword is sticking out. They didn't have to do that sort of a die cut thing, but they did. All of these, they go the extra mile with the aesthetics on all these boxes and figures. The figures, you know, they might be a little bit crude, but there's an artistry there. There's an aesthetic there. It's sort of a, you know, an artisanal aesthetic, but still, they have an aesthetic. They're not just a, you know, perfunctory sort of a thing where someone phoned it in. There was a vision here. Very dramatic looking image. And a different looking image. I mean, that, well, that's a painting. That's not the toy. But it doesn't really, the other images, the paintings of these characters look very much like the toy. That one doesn't. What do we got going on here? Let me see, what does the background look like? It's hard to see. What is it showing this? Looks like the exterior of a castle with some trees. I like that dragon. He's neat. He's a classic dragon. It's not a revisionist kind of a dragon. Here he is out of the box. And there's no way to make this thing stand up. He will fall over every time. But he's still cool. And his wings are separate pieces attached to the body. These kinds of toys are very common now. I mentioned Michael's a little while ago. If you go to Michael's or Hobby Lobby, these hobby type craft stores, you'll see bins full of these PVC animals, and they'll also have mythological creatures. I know there's a Bigfoot and a Yeti, but they're small. I know Hobby Lobby has Bigfoot and Yeti. Michael's might have it too. But then you'll see dinosaurs, you'll see dragons. Those kinds of toys were not as common in the 90s. They're common now, but it was more unusual to see something like this in the 90s. It was more special in the 90s. Now you would go to certain stores and see a wire bin with just, stuff like this just piled high, but not in the 90s, not in the mid-90s when these first came out. What should we look at next? Not the Centaur, because that's a second series. Don't we have another? Oh yeah, we do. Here's the last of the first series monsters, if you want to call them a monster. This is the unicorn. Not a monster, but a mythological creature. I'm pretty sure I got this at a store. But this, I think, was the last one that I bought at a store. I wasn't going to buy him because, it's a unicorn. It wasn't a monster, but I thought, no, I'm going to collect the entire series. So then I bought him. I think I got him at PetSmart. I'm thinking that the person who would buy the Bigfoot or the alien probably wouldn't be the same person who'd buy the unicorn. I think this would appeal to a different demographic. Unless you're a completist like me. He's cute. He's a unicorn. What can you say? He's a nice unicorn. There's a lot of different ways that could have gone. But I think he's in keeping with the style of the rest of the monsters. They could have made him prettier. They could have made him more fierce. They could have gone different directions. I think they struck a good balance. It appeals to someone who just wants a unicorn toy, someone who's not really into monsters. But it also has that mythological, sort of Harryhausen style, mythological creature vibe. Okay, now let's look at the second series. There's only 2 in that second series. Here's the Centaur. Kind of an odd choice for... Well, it's only an odd choice because they made 2. If they had made 6 more and one of them was a Centaur, I'd say, okay, fine. But you'd think if they were going to go in this direction, maybe they'd do a Cyclops or a Medusa. They did make a chupacabra, but not in this scale. I'll talk about him later. But a large chupacabra in a box like this would have been nice. A ghost. They did make ghosts. We'll talk about them. But a large ghost in this box would have been nice. I can think of all kinds of strange monsters they could have made in this scale, in this style. The Centaur, he kind of goes along with the unicorn. I could see the two of them being side by side. I haven't read this back out loud. I think they've all got the same opening paragraph. Myths and legends, and I love how it's got a pronunciation for myths and legends. Myths and legends. Oh, it's a definition, like a dictionary definition. Myths and legends. Classic stories or tales traditionally passed down for generations, popularly believed to have an historical basis, but threaded with fantasy and imagination. The Fantastic Myths and Legends series is a meticulously created quality collection of the world's most famous myths and legends. Each exciting Shadowbox collectible offers you an educational journey into the fascinating world of the unexplained. Collect them all and share your discoveries with friends, family, and fellow collectors. So it seems like there was a bit of an educational toy element to these. And they, again, like I've said, they would be good for bookstores. They have an educational toy style vibe. They do seem like educational toys. Here's the last of the big ones. The Yeti. It's got a sticky price sticker spot there. He looks different from the Bigfoot. They could have just taken the Bigfoot and painted him white, but they sculpted a whole new creature. And he's very different. That's not really the expression you'd expect on the Abominable Snowman. He's kind of alarmed. And of course he's in his Himalayan snowscape. Interesting fur. It doesn't look like they reused any of the Bigfoot sculpt at all. It's completely new. That's an interesting interpretation there, too. And if you're into the the Abominable Snowman, you know he's not supposed to be white. But that's the legend. He's popularly known as being white. I don't know if that background really is the Himalayas or the Alps or an American mountain range. It's a nice little, snowy mountain environment. He's a cute little Yeti. And I noticed at this point they're securing the scrolls so they don't rattle around like the early ones. Now the scrolls are tied to the figure so they hold their place. That's the last of the big monsters. Now let's look at the aliens. And as I said, I only have the first series of the aliens. Here's a crash course. The entire, oh my gosh, it's cracking. I don't like seeing that. There's the entire first series all at one time. Here's a Men in Black. Looks like a member of the Blues Brothers. And this is before the movie Men in Black, before the first film. You can see all the different critters. All of these were sold separately, and they were sold as this set. They've all got their names, what kind of alien they are. I don't think they made the second series on a big blister pack like this. Maybe they did. I would think if they did, I would have it. Because then I would just, instead of having to collect them individually, I would just bought them all together. But so these aliens in this set are the Gray, Reptilian, Roswell, Neonate, Ancient, Nordic, Men in Black. And once upon a time I was really into ufology, and I can attest those are all styles of aliens that people reported. There's the Nordic alien, basically a human. That's one type of alien. They come with trading cards. Here's the Gray alien, the most classic one. The big boxed one is an example of this, the Gray alien. Here's his little card. Here's our friend the Reptilian. And I have him loose too, but I couldn't find him for this video. But I do have a loose one of these. And I think he's my favorite. He's cute. Reminds me of the color forms that are spacemen. It's too bad these aren't rubber bendies, or maybe they could have repurposed the sculpts, the molds, and turned them into bendies. The Roswell alien, so that's supposed to be the type of alien that they found in the Roswell crash. Kind of looks like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You can see his little spaceship back there. This is the last that I have. The Neonate alien. Am I pronouncing that right? Neonate? I think it's supposed to be, I think it's supposed to resemble an infant or a fetus. I think that's why it's the neonate alien, I think. I'm just kind of guessing. I didn't read the back. I guess it kind of has a 2001 Star Child look. Maybe that's what they're going for. It's a cute little set. I wish I had the second series. The second series includes a chupacabra. But he just looks like a little gray. He kind of looks like the neonate, but reptilian, like a reptilian version of the neonate. He's green, he has big eyes. And then there's a robot in the second series that looks like someone in a hazmat suit. Kind of reminds me of Robot versus the Aztec Mummy. It's this big clunky suit. Well, this one's got tape on it. I think, do these all have tape? Yeah, they've all got tape. So these are taped shut. And the tape's coming off of some of them. What else does that second series have? Oh, I don't remember. But it'd be nice to at least have a few of them. If I couldn't get them all, it'd be nice to have those two in particular, the chupacabra and the robot. Oh, maybe one of these days. They've been sort of out of sight, out of mind for many years. Now, in addition to these, they also made a line of ghost action figures. And I might do a separate episode at some point on the ghosts. The ghosts aren't really, they're not based on, at least I don't think they're based on real ghosts that people have actually seen. It's not like taking famous cases of ghost activity, ghost sightings, and trying to depict them as a toy. They take famous people, like I think one of them is Edgar Allan Poe, and I think maybe Abraham Lincoln might be another one. But they're all famous people, but translucent ghost versions of those people. And I'll show them. I don't know if it's not going to be the most exciting episode you ever saw, but I'll probably just do a short little episode on them and to get those out of the way. But they're carded, bubble carded. They're not these blister packs or boxes. They're bubble cards. Cardboard cards with the bubble glued on. And they're a little different in style. But it's interesting they also went there. They did ghosts as well. They did the mythological monsters. They did aliens. They did ghosts. I can't think of anything else that I remember from Shadowbox. They shifted from these more elaborate boxed and packaged and carded toys to just loose figures with tags. And they re-released several sculpts in glow-in-the-dark in different colors. I think they had some in different materials that were squishy. They focused on the aliens, like that alien life form. That they put him out in different versions, and they put the dragon out in different versions. And I don't know what else. But you would go into a store, like just a mall store, and there might be just by the checkout lane, there might be a dump box just with a bunch of glow-in-the-dark aliens. Well, it was that alien, but in glow-in-the-dark and just with a tag instead of in a box. Stuff like that, and they had different colors, the dragon in different colors, stuff like that. I think that was the last hurrah for the company as far as I know. They never went back to these more elaborate deluxe boxed toys. Now, I don't know what year the company ceased to exist, but I know they're not around now. And I don't remember them being around in the 2000s. Maybe they were, but I remember them being a 90s thing, mid-90s. That was the era of the X-Files. That was the era of Art Bell, Coast to Coast on the radio at night. lots of documentaries on TV, UFO conventions. I actually went to a couple and saw some of these big names at the time in ufology, the authors, and listened to them speak. That was... we were getting movies like Communion and stuff like that, Fire in the Sky. That was the X-Files was the epicenter of all that. I would think the X-Files on TV and Art Bell on the radio, I think those two things were the engine driving this cultural phenomenon in the 90s. That really was the paranormal decade. The 70s, that was a paranormal decade for Bigfoot and Nessie, and also UFOs and ancient aliens and chariots of the gods. But then it had a different kind of rebirth in the 90s. I prefer the 70s iteration of that fad. But there's something to be said for the 90s. It was slicker in the 90s. It was more mainstream. But it was also more cultish, and I feel like it did more damage in the 90s. I have nostalgia for the 70s paranormal fad, because I feel like it was sort of innocent. But the 90s one, it wasn't as innocent. And some of the names associated with it, I look back on them now and I think, boy, a lot of those people were just con artists, and maybe even worse than that. And I feel like they did some real harm. And in many ways, that cultural phenomenon did some real harm in a way that I don't think the 70s version of it did. I feel like the 70s version was all in fun. But then when you got to the 90s, there was something dark about it. But in any case, there was an anxiety about it, because I think it was the millennium approaching added to that. We were heading towards 2000. I think that played into the more darker tone of all this. Whereas in the 70s, it could be more of an adventure. In the 90s, it felt dark, even at the time. Obviously, The X-Files is a dark show, and the copycats of The X-Files were dark shows, and Coast to Coast was a dark show. And I think that show, with Art Bell, as fun as it might have been at the time, looking back, I think there was a lot of negativity, and I think a lot of people were conned and manipulated by that show in an unhealthy, destructive way. So it's not as innocent as Leonard Nimoy on In Search Of, or Bestoink Dooley looking for the monster of the mountain. I feel like that's a more innocent time in the 70s. That's my time. But I know there's a lot of people who are nostalgic for the 90s. Of course, if you grew up in that time, if you're young in that time. And I was young in the 90s. I wasn't a child, but I was young. And there's some nostalgic value, and these are a more innocent reflection of that time. I think it was a darker time, but these are not dark. These toys are a more innocent reflection of the popularity of this subject matter. And they're very new age. That's why you have like the unicorn, the dragon and stuff. There were new age shops at the time, like selling crystals and things. I mean, I went to some of those. I still have some crystals and stuff I bought in the 90s. There are shops like that. And this sort of plays into that. So there's that whole New Age thing, besides the more darker paranormal aspect. There's that spiritual, kind of trendy New Age element, and these are compatible with that. What were they doing at PetSmart? I have no idea. Why were they selling Bigfoot toys at Pets? These were not for pets. These were not for a dog to chew on. I don't know what was going on. Why were they at PetSmart? I have no clue. That was bizarre. And that never made sense. Even at the time, when I saw them at PetSmart, I couldn't figure out, what are they doing here? There was no context. There was just toys at PetSmart. People toys. Now, Suncoast Video, that made sense. But PetSmart? Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this little excursion. Oh, I wanted to point something out about the Bigfoot. I forgot. Yeah, this Bigfoot. One last thing about this Bigfoot. He is modeled off the Bigfoot in a movie called Cry Wilderness. Cry Wilderness. It's a 1987 film, Cry Wilderness. I've seen it. I've got it on DVD. It's a terrible movie. It just makes you grit your teeth. It is a awful, awful, awful movie. Ugh, my gosh. I don't mean in a fun way like Legend of McCullough's Mountain. I mean, it's just bad. Oh gosh. It's terrible. It's hard to sit through. And there's all kinds of animals, and it feels like they're being mistreated. There's a scene with a raccoon where this guy's manhandling a raccoon. I'm like, oh, be careful with the raccoon, stop that. I think there was someone who had a petting zoo or like a rescue center or something who supplied all the animals in the movie. And I just keep looking at the animals thinking, they don't look like they're happy. Something sketchy here. And the performances are just, my gosh, it just makes you grit your teeth. It's a bad movie. Cry Wilderness, 1987. It's a bad, bad movie. Don't watch it. Watch something stupid from the 70s, like Legend of Bigfoot, or Creature from Black Lake. That's a good movie. Watch those things, but by the time you get to 1987, yeah, the whole Bigfoot movie cycle has run its course. Now you're heading into Harry and the Hendersons territory. But that's where this thing came from. That's where the design obviously came from. Cry Wilderness. That's clearly, I mean, look at it. That's where they got that. Whoever sculpted these, that was their model. Cry Wilderness. I don't know about the other ones. Now, I think I said something about Ernest Borgnine a while ago. I'm obviously referencing the Tomlin Yeti with that. So I might have been contradicting myself, saying they didn't do that with this line. Well, they did, but at least they were modeling the Bigfoot off a Bigfoot, a movie Bigfoot, a particular movie Bigfoot, not off some other character. Okay, I just wanted to get that last point in. I think that's everything. We've beaten this into the ground. I hope you had a wonderful wonderful holiday. I don't know when I'm going to upload this, but it will be after the holidays for sure. And I hope you have a great 2024. I hope we all do. I hope we have a great 2024. And without any little gray aliens or any weird stuff like that. Thanks for watching. Until next time, the one who dies with the most toys is dead.